Good evening, everybody. I have been looking forward to playing this for quite some time. So we will do our usual outline in terms of life events, and we'll talk a little bit about why I want to play this game tonight. And I'll also talk. If we're lucky, we're actually going to have more than one game tonight. It sort of depends on what changes they've made to this one here. But I hope everybody's doing well. Let me just double check that chat is working the way it should be. Seems to be right. So I can't see anything in terms of chat yet, but that's probably just because everybody's filing in, and I always need to contend a little bit with. Oddities of running a stream on a Mac. So, as usual, hope everybody is doing well. Starting to see some bodies file in. So, in terms of what I've been doing, I still been working on this research project. It's definitely taken a turn for the interesting, but it's also resulted in quite a bit more work than I was planning. So it's the topic isn't really all that interesting in terms of discussing on stream, but I think I can explain it sort of briefly. This is going to be presented at a conference in Greece, and it concerns itself with the idea of sort of creating standards for things. So, like, obviously, you know, you can pick up a cell phone and basically it'll work with pretty much any carrier that you have. These carriers have invested a certain amount in terms of infrastructure to make sure that, you know, you can actually use your cell phone or something like that. When we're using Sleepbringer, how are you doing tonight? Thanks a lot for stopping by. I saw you were streaming, I don't think it was yesterday, but it was recently. I didn't get a chance to see it, but I'm glad to see that you're up. I hope your finals went well. I don't think I've actually gotten a chance to talk to you since you finished your finals, but I hope they went well, and I hope they went better than my econometrics one did, although my thesis in the end actually turned out to do pretty well. But yeah, long story short on this thing, basically it's concerning with the creation of sort of international standards and trying to get over some problems that come up during that. For instance, if you know that you're going to become the standard and you have a patent on that standard, once people start building up that infrastructure, if you haven't signed some agreement with somebody yet, you have every incentive to overcharge them and create what's known as a hold-up problem. Now, the hold-up problem is considered to be more or less solved, at least by the people who are working on policy. But there's a couple of other things that are still at play. And I believe it's the most recent winner of the Nobel Prize, Jean Triol at Toulouse University, has written on this topic. He'll be presenting at this conference, but there's still, like, it's an area that hasn't been completely investigated. The prof that I'm working for works quite a bit on the theoretical elements of the economics of intellectual property, and I think one of the reasons she brought me on was to do some work on to take a look at what empirical work has been done. I've talked with her a couple of times to see if I can blend some things together in terms of what she's worked on and what these other academics have. So it's interesting. It's definitely the kind of stuff I like doing, which is, material that people have, for one reason or another, have sort of left on the wayside. But Jean Triol probably got his Nobel precisely because the work that he does is very difficult, which means that the work I have to do is sifting through this guy who's able to work on really difficult. You've got 3.8 for last semester. That's incredible. I remember once upon a time I used to be able to pull out averages like that, and then I just became a complete hack and tried to pass some of my classes. So, anyways, so that's why I've not been as, like, my original plan for the summer was to be able to do a lot more streaming in general, and just this research project, it's interesting. It's the sort of stuff that I like doing, but it also means that I have less time to work on, to do more streams. So we'll make up for that tonight. So let's talk. That's really the only biography. And there's other stuff I can talk about, but we'll maybe save that for another time. So let's talk about Gods Will Be Watching. I guess a week ago, they announced kind of out of nowhere this free DLC for this game. It's not really like, I always imagine DLC as sort of this optional package that you install. What happened? There was an update to this game, and they added what they call the final chapter. Now, I believe Gods Will Be Watching is the first, like, since I became sort of a regular streamer rather than just doing the Extra Life charity event. Gods Will Be Watching, I believe, is actually the first game, at least among the first game, one of the first games that I've completed on stream. And I actually think it's a really good one. It's a very simple one. This game was originally a Ludum Dare game. So this scene that you see here where everybody's kind of surviving in the wilderness, that was the original Gods Will Be Watching, and that was all that the game was. And you had to manage your resources and sort of survive long enough to repair your radio and be rescued. And they expanded it to this really interesting sort of story of interstellar espionage, and you play the character of Burden, who sort of has this shift in his name. Sometimes he's Abraham Burden, sometimes he's Sergeant Burden, sometimes he's just Burden on his own. I think there's a very specific reason why they do that in terms of the story. And I think what appealed to me the most in this game, I would, these kinds of labels always wind up, I don't know, labels like this always sort of wind up to be a little bit more hyperbole, but I would actually call this the Dark Souls of adventure games. And there's two reasons why I say this. Number one, this game is merciless. You will lose a lot. But that is some of the fun. Like, its difficulty is part of the appeal. And the next part is that your constant failure, your constant deaths are actually part of the story. So, Dark Souls, maybe it's a little bit more of the game mechanic rather than part of the story, although this idea of, the undead, you're sort of trying to retain your last scraps of humanity before you become this feral, hollow creature. You could argue there's a little bit of the story inside of there. Gods Will Be Watching actually outright confronts the fact that, one, the game encourages you to take risks, so Burden becomes this figure who everybody refers, he just seems born to survive, It confronts you with the fact that you generally have very little value on human life just because you are constantly chewing through these events. And I really enjoy the ending, so I won't dwell with it too much, but they do actually make this idea that you're just sort of going through these permutations, figuring out how to best solve the situations. At the end of this game, it directly confronts you with that. It's not just simply a mechanic that gets you through the game because the game would suck if it deleted itself after losing once, but they actually turn that into a plot point. So it's a very original story. It's a very original narrative experience, and I think Deconstruct team did a really wonderful job with this game. I remember I was compelled to load up the game again and talk a little bit more about the story when I completed it. Yeah, absolutely, Sleepbringer. I love the fact that Dark Souls is... I love the fact that Dark Souls is not... it doesn't spoon-feed you anything. You have to work to beat the enemies. And in that one, you die a lot and you get a little bit better and you progress. But even things like the story, you actually need to listen to the character. You need to... it's not going to tell you, this thing is really important, so start paying attention. You need to actually read the little bits of lore that it gets you, and you need to sort of piece things together. The opening cinematic looks really nice, and it actually tells you some things. I would argue it provides you some solutions to boss fights. I'm thinking particularly the Furtive Pygmy. That... I think there's some depths to Dark Souls that maybe some people miss just because it's now got this reputation for being a really difficult game. But, Gods Will Be Watching. Again, I don't want to oversell it. It is a very simple point-and-click adventure-style game. You need to manage your resources properly. So it's not really going to blow your socks off as far as like any major action or something like that. But to me, like this is a very interesting story. I've never really seen a story like this told, and it absolutely hit me on all of the things that I like about adventure gaming like this. So I should let everybody know, I believe it's got a couple more days of its sale. This is a game I very strongly recommend. I was actually going to talk a little bit about my tiff with Telltale games because I have it resolved. I am not buying any more Telltale games. This is not to say you shouldn't buy Telltale games. I'm done with that company. Humble Bundle really stood up to the plate, and they dealt with the issue. I actually quite liked how Humble Store handled it. But Telltale Games is not the only... So in my case, I need to say, well, what do I play instead of Telltale Games? And I will let you know right now that Telltale Games is not the last word on narrative. In fact, I don't even necessarily think that they have that much that's original with their narratives. I'll talk about that later. Like, it's not that I'm declaring a fatwa on TTG. But games like this definitely deserve your support. And, if you look at the trailer and you think it looks interesting, if you watch this playthrough and it seems like your kind of thing, it's actually on a very, very good discount on Steam right now. I believe they said they'd be keeping that discount up for a week from the most recent patch, so it'll be going away soon. But if I can get anybody who wouldn't have otherwise played this game to give it a shot, I would be very happy, because I definitely think this game is worthy of people's considerations. I agree completely, Sleepbringer. I think Dark Souls has got more going for it than just the difficulty. Yeah, Sleepbringer, like the Telltale thing I'll save for another, like I'm going to make a VOD about it. It's just something that happened with me. But there's like it's unique to me as a Mac user, so I need to keep these things in proportions, which is the reasons why I don't think it's a good idea for me to continue buying Telltale games I don't think are realistically going to affect PC users. As a consumer, I'm obviously going to advocate for consumers, and I have some things to say about the way that TTG handled things. But like I was in Jesse Quill's channel the other day, or not the other day, a couple hours ago, and people were like really aggressive, like they were aggressively campaigning against Origin and against Mass Effect 3. Now I understand a lot of people are really disappointed with Mass Effect 3. I've not played it personally, but it seems really weird to me that people take disliking that game as a statement of like religious faith. Like, it's not just enough that you don't like Mass Effect 3 and that you've said that you don't like Mass Effect 3, but you need to give like this ironclad case to make sure that no other person in the room can walk away with any other impression but Mass Effect 3 is a bad game. I'm always very weirded out when people want to do stuff like that. I think it's good to talk about why you do and don't play certain games and what you do and don't like and certain things like that, but the vitriol that people spit at at Mass Effect is a little weird to me. Anyways, so for those, you had a lot of friends who were vehemently against ME3 and Origin. Yeah, like I get it, right? Like EA does not have a very good reputation amongst gamers, and I think in many cases it's a deserved reputation. But there's a lot of games that I haven't liked, and I have no problem telling people that I didn't think they were very good. I just never quite got to the point where it was so important to me that somebody else have the same opinion about a particular game as me. But I don't know. Everybody has their own little values. So the thing I was going to say about Gods Will Be Watching is for the sharp-eyed among you, those of you who followed me through to the with the original playthrough, will see that there's an additional character here. This is Liam, who looks slightly different given that he now has grown a goatee. Oh yeah, this is the LOL Dota thing is ridiculous. I've talked about it quite a few times. I think the games are sufficiently different that yes, you can express preferences between one or the other, and I suspect that both parties will be right if they were to just preface their comments with saying, this is the kind of game that I like. But I don't believe the success of Dota 2 necessitates the failure of League of Legends, just as I don't feel that League of Legends, necessarily has to worry about Dota 2 taking away all the best players. But, I mean, again, people... I don't know, it seems weird. I sometimes get the impression that people aren't able to have a conversation about things anymore, I remember... Okay, so this is actually going to be a little bit... I guess I'll talk about one more thing before I jump into the game. So I was on the street, and I was carrying a book with me, so I finished Game Change. I'm actually watching the HBO movie, which is pretty interesting. It's definitely quite different from the book because the book begins with the Democratic primaries and the competition between Obama and Clinton. Yeah, exactly, Sleepbringer. Like, I've tried to play both. I definitely, my tastes definitely make me a Dota 2 player. I am trying to get into League, and I've not quite been able to let it get its hooks in me. I'm making something of an effort, but not a strong one. But with that in mind, I don't say to League players, like, oh, why do you like that crappy game? There's no point. Oh, that's not a problem. I like talking about this stuff, Sleepbringer. But it's, on this point of the inability to have, conversations. Oh, Superior Blaze, thank you very much for the host. By the way, there are people still in here. I should actually let everybody, if anybody would like to... Actually, maybe it'll be better I just, rather than getting people to click or bring links into the chat... all of you good people who are not yet following the Sleepbringer and Superior Blaze, if you could be darlings, click on their names and give them a follow. Both of them are very good casters, and while I have not spent a sufficient amount of time in either channel, every time I do go in, I've tremendously enjoyed myself, and I think you guys would as well. There's actually quite a few. It's kind of neat. I've noticed the difference between number of people in chat and number of people it says who are currently watching is actually really different, and it seems to be growing each time I play. So I will actually click on the extra chapter here. But I'll talk. Whoa! Let's click stay and click on... We recommend that you finish the game before playing the extra chapter. If you didn't, you'll see some spoilers and probably won't get what the hell is happening. Well, I did play it, so... Kite260, how you doing, my friend? This is another excellent streamer, so again, as I said with everybody, I probably should stop getting these wonderful people who give me hosts and attention. I should probably stop getting them to do my my work for me. I still don't have a fancy bot in this channel, but... I had given you some kudos for Sleepbringer, some kudos for Superior Blaze. I would also strongly recommend that you click on Kite's name and give him a follow as well, because not only is he somebody who